Hello and welcome back to the Everyday Leadership Series. I am incredibly excited to share with you Mr. Chris Farmer. Today, we're going to have a fantastic conversation. Let me just tell you a little bit more about him. When Chris was age 37, he started his company, The Corporate Coach. He wrote unique training programs based on the ideas and methods that he has assembled. He framed his programs into a system that was and still is designed to answer the same fundamental question: how can you get the best performance from yourself and others, which I think is an amazing question. The Corporate Coach Group is based on three fundamental principles. They are clarity, rationality, and positivity. So, Chris, thank you so much and welcome to the Everyday Leadership Series. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Thank you for inviting me. I very much appreciate your time.
My pleasure, my pleasure. So I know that we have a lot of places that we can go with the conversation, but let's just start off easy. How about you tell everyone, what does leadership mean to you?
Leadership is a set of special attributes or skills that people either learn from chance or they can learn from reading, which enables them to answer the question that you started with. It enables them to get the best from themselves and others. As I say, some people either drift into it or they're genetically gifted and they just seem to be able to do it. We call those natural leaders. But the majority of people have to learn how to do it, either through trial and error or possibly by training. Obviously, learning by trial and error can be painful, so we believe that training might be a better way to go. It's faster and less painful. But the question is, how do you assemble, how do you explain what leadership is? So we came across the concepts of clarity, rationality, and positivity. We said in order to be clear, we must be clear in our thought and in our speech. 2, reasonable. Now, I've got a lot to say about the word reason later on in this conversation. But fundamentally, we are rational people, we hope to be anyway, and we must treat all people and all problems according to rational principles. And then thirdly, in the emotional level, we must be positive. And that means two things. It means positive intentions towards other people. And it also means a positive mental attitude, meaning that we have essentially an optimistic mindset where we believe that the future will be better than the present or the past. So we could say that leadership is essentially just three things: clarity, reason, and positive emotion. But from there, what we did was we broke down each of those three concepts and we gave them two subsets. So if I wanted to say, my first answer was clarity, reason, positive emotion, but clarity has two subsets, rationality has two subsets, and positivity has two subsets. So I'm just going to go through the 6 things now rather than 3. Clarity means fundamentally clarity of purpose, clarity of purpose. This is the first and most important factor in leadership. A leader must be leading people somewhere. So if they don't know where it is they're going, they can't lead. So people who don't know where they're going, I call those drifter mentalities, drifters. They don't know where they're going. So leaders can't be drifters by definition. They have to have a clear vision for a better future. So that's what we call clarity of purpose. Secondarily, clarity of communication. So you'll see that all the great leaders are also great communicators. If we had a list of all the great communicators and another list of all the great leaders, you'd see some people on both lists, many people. Because if you've got a great vision, but you can't communicate it to anybody, you're not going to get much of a following. So great leaders should and often are great communicators. Now, you might think I'm clear, but you might think I'm clearly wrong. So now we have to have reasons, you see. We have to have a rational goal, not just any goal, because if you have an irrational goal, you become a very dangerous person. Rationality has two subsets, and that really means, number one, the ability to prioritize your resources. So that's prioritizing time, prioritizing money, prioritizing effort, coming up with good strategic and tactical plans which are capable of achieving the goal that we set at point 1. So that's the third point. Fourth point, rational conflict. Because have you heard of the phrase which is a divided house falls? I think it was Lincoln who said that. teams can fall because of internal division, and good leaders are very good at bringing people together under the same banner, because within the team there are very many different personalities, different ages, different types, and they all have to come together to work in cooperative unions in order to achieve the goal. So one of the attributes of a good leader is the ability to resolve internal conflicts within teams. Now we move on to the emotions. So we have two subsets for the emotions. Positivity means positive self. Now these are all the selves: self-control, self-discipline, self-awareness, self-motivation. Because one of the goals of a leader is to motivate the team, but the question arises, who motivates the motivator? And the answer is no one motivates the motivator. The motivator motivates themselves from the inside out. You see, many people are waiting for somebody to come and motivate them, but who motivates the person who's going to motivate them? And the answer is they're self-determined. They're self-determined individuals. Leaders are very self-determined. They can manage their own self, manage their own emotions. So you can never quite tell whether the person, you could never tell, let's put it another way, you would never know whether a leader was having a bad day, because as far as you're concerned, this person looks like they're having a terrific day because they put their best foot forward on all times, you see. They're able to present an image which is always positive. So that gives me 5 skills, major skills: clear purpose, clear communication, good at planning, good at resolving conflict, and good at managing my own emotions. And if I've got those first 5, I've got the last one as a prize, which is the ability to inspire other people. Now, ultimately, the ability to inspire other people is the goal of leadership, but you don't get that for free. You get that only when you have achieved the other 5 goals. So when we have got the other 5, we get the last one for free, which is we can influence other people to believe in themselves and believe in the goal and believe in better futures. So that for me is what leadership is.
Oh, what an amazing and, dare I say, comprehensive answer. And I really like the way that you've broken it out, from your 3 primary objectives to even with the additional 2 subsets, because it really does cover a lot of ground. That, to your point, I think a lot of times we focus on how do I get the power, how do I get the control, how do I get the influence? And to your point, once you have all these foundational attributes in place, then you kind of get the influence for free, so to speak. It kind of comes with it because you have all these other foundational attributes in place, and they're operating at the skill level that they should. So hopefully you saw I was taking notes, because I think that is absolutely phenomenal. Before we started recording, we were chatting about a mutual colleague who says, I'm not accepting bad news anymore. Everything is long range good news. Yes. And, I really thought about that as you were saying that a leader has the responsibility of managing their own emotions, because no one motivates the motivator. Yes. So I'd love for us to chat a little bit more about that, because it's easy to say that you self-motivate, but it is incredibly hard to do. Because the truth is, a lot of things feel very bad news in the short term, even though, to their point, all things do tend to be long-term good news, but they feel very not so good in the beginning. So talk to us a little bit more about how we can implement some of these mindset attributes to help us reframe things to be long-term good news or self-motivating.
Okay. Yes. Okay. I've got a punchline for you. It's this. You feel what you think about. You feel whatever you think about. So if you're thinking about your worries, you'll feel worried. If you're thinking about your troubles, you'll feel troubled. If you think you're going to win, you'll feel confident. If you think you cannot win, you can't possibly feel confident. So the punchline is you feel whatever you think about. Next question, who determines what you think about? Answer, you do. No one else does, you see. But they can influence you. There are many influences in the world, the radio, the TV, YouTube, and all these other influencers. And there's millions of people paid millions of pounds to try to influence your mind. And if you hand your mind over to the internet, or if you hand your mind over to your friends, or hand your mind over to your boss, you see, and give your mind open to other people to dump whatever trash they want to, then you lay yourself to be what behaviorists tell us we are, which is programmed by our circumstances. I believe you can be programmed by circumstances if you're allowed to be, but We all retain the potential to determine our own selves simply by taking control of a single attribute, which is what we think about. Now, I divide what I think about into 4 quadrants. Okay, so if you can picture this, if you're drawing a line down the page with future and past, future at the top, past at the bottom, and then draw another axis and say bad and good, then the bottom left hand is the past bad. Okay, now if you allow your mind to be filled with all the bad things that have happened to you in your past, all the upsets, all the disappointments, all the injustices, all the injuries, all the bad luck that you've had to suffer, if that is your basic narrative, that's what you allow your mind to dwell upon, then you're going to feel emotions consistent with that thought process. So what are the emotions consistent with thinking, I've been treated badly in my past, I am being the victim of circumstances and of other people? See, if that's your basic narrative, you're going to feel upset, you're going to feel angry, you're going to feel bitter. And if your thought process is, I have been bad in my past, I have performed badly in my past, so because I never do very well, I'm not likely to do well, you see. So if you think that I am bad in my past, then you're going to feel guilt, remorse, regret, and a loss of self-confidence. So that's the bottom left-hand quadrant there. The top left-hand quadrant is the future will be bad. Now, I believe that the whole planet is locked into the future will be bad narrative, ably assisted by many pundits, politicians, pressure groups, the media. They have got a single narrative, which is this: it's bad and it's going to get worse. It's bad and it's going to get worse. Now, I've been hearing that all my life. I'm in my 50s now, and I cannot think of a time where we weren't being told that within 20 years, we're all going to be dead. And the narrative changes, but the basic narrative is the same. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Now, to the degree to which you let this particular belief system get into your subconscious mind is the degree that you're going to feel worried, anxious, and even panic. I got a friend who has panic attacks. He calls it a general sense of dread. Well, dread, what a terrible word. I said, John, do you really mean dread? Because that's a strong word. He said, do you really mean it, or are you just talking? He said, no, I dread the future. I dread the future. I would never have children nowadays. And no, and he means it. I mean, the guy is in panic mode, literally. He has panic attacks. Now, I never admit to using the word panic. I've never had a panic attack, but I would admit to you that up to the age of 40, I was living in a world of what I call low-level chronic anxiety. Like many other people, they're anxious for the future. They're anxious for their financial future. They're anxious for their kids. They're anxious for the planet. They're worried. They can't sleep at night, basically because they've allowed their mental domination of the thought, the future will be worse than today. It's getting worse, you see. Now, let's go to the bottom right. The past was better than today. I'm going to call that quadrant. The past was better than today. If you keep thinking the past was better than today, today's no good. It was better in the good old days when we were younger, when we were better looking, when I had more hair. I wish I could go back in time. I don't like today. I want to go back to how it was, when we had better music, better television, and people were nicer in the good old days. Now, I know people who I got a friend called Roger. He really wants to go back to the 1980s. He said in the 1980s, we had proper music. We had Queen, you know, we had, in the 70s, we had ABBA, proper bands. You know? He hates today. He feels like a refugee from the past and he wants to go back, you see.
A refugee from the past. I love that.
So now this is worrying. I'm meant to be talking about positive mental attitude. I'm 3/4 of the way through this model and it's all bad. One box is full of fear. The other box is full of anger. The other box is full of nostalgia for the good old days. There's only one place that you can be positive: when you have a mind that is focused on the belief that today and the future will be good. Today and the future will be good. Now, there are plenty of reasons to be worried, but there are also, if you look for them, many, many good reasons to be optimistic for a better future, not the least of which is always increasing use of technology, because today I'm talking to you, that would have been impossible 5 or 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
And the project that you've put in place, you see, couldn't have happened without the technology that we're using right now. So technology has lifted mankind out of the caves and into spaceships, and this will continue on and on. So even though we see certain elements of human nature, you know, not as right as we would like it, we must also recognize the great achievements of human nature, which is fundamentally the ability to use new tools and devise new ways of conquering the problems that face us. So I believe that no matter what happens, the general trend is always upwards, even though when you watch the news every day, it seems to be getting worse every day. But when you think over the last 10 years, how far we've come in terms of our technological advance, and we can tell it's good because the population of the planet still continues to increase. And I know that people say we've got to feed all these people, but food manufacture is not the problem. We can grow plenty of food. It's distribution that's the problem. So it's distributing the wealth that's the tricky thing. Wealth creation we've mastered. The human race has got more than it's ever had in its history. We are probably the best fed, best educated, most well looked after generation in the history of the human race. 3.7 billion years, you know, life on this planet, and we're the best. We are the privileged. We are the privileged few. When my granny was born, she was born in a world which would have been recognized by a Roman soldier, because when my granny was born, you know, people got around on horses.
Right.
So when my granny was born, there were horses in the street. By the time she died, the man was on the moon. She was born about 1901. What was the moon landed? 1969. In that 69-year period, we went from effectively Roman technology to space age technology in a one lifetime.
That's remarkable. And
yeah.
I really like that, you know, back to our original point that, you know, over the long term, things are generally good and things are generally good news. And, you know, I can just think, you know, thinking about your granny, think about the amount of change that she went through in her lifetime, you know, 2 world wars, like, you know, to your point, technology went from Roman to space age. I mean, it's honestly remarkable. So to think about how resilient, you know, and malleable a person has to be about how they view the world to have lived through that. You know, we think that we are, you know, some sort of amazing human beings to have TikTok now or something. But in reality, when you phrase it in that lifespan, you know, like, wow, I already know that they are the greatest generation. That's what we call them in the States. But with that reframe, it makes them seem even more just resilient and great. I think that is, wow, really, really good reframe. So, you know, I got a second question for you, you know, so with this in mind, you know, to your point, 3 out of the 4 quadrants are negative in some sort of aspect, which makes sense as to why it's so difficult to get over our own negative thoughts, because 75% of our options are negative.
So if you don't control I think of that grid as a pitch that people run out onto. Imagine you had 100 people run out onto this pitch and it's gridded off in 4 quadrants, and you let them run around at random without any knowledge, without any comprehension about the meaning of the markers on that grid. Then at any one time, only a quarter of them would be happy. Or putting it another way, many people are only a quarter as happy as they could be. You see, because what most people are, they're overdosing on worry, or they're overdosing on anger, or they're overdosing on nostalgia. Those are they're the 3 headings for the 3 boxes: the worry box, the angry box for the past was bad, nostalgia box for the past was better. And if you just were equal, if we just equaled it out, you'd be about a quarter happy. Well, for me, a quarter happy just doesn't cut it.
It doesn't.
I want to be at least half happy. You know, I figure that everybody has to have the right to be half happy, at least. You know, that's minimum. And in order to achieve half happy, you must take control of the content of your mind. You have to have a little bit of your mind watching its activity, because if personally, everyone has a preference. I know a guy called Richard who gets angry like that. You know, he'll get angry at the drop of a hat. We were playing a board game the other day and he couldn't think of the answer. And he says, it makes me angry when I can't find my answer. Like, I'm thinking, crikey, we're only playing a board game. There's no need to get angry because you can't think of the answer. But anger to him is his natural go-to emotion, you see. For me, up to the age of 40, and like many people on this planet, worry or even fear, let's drop it back. Anxious worry, I call it. Anxious worry was my go-to emotion. I lived in a world of anxious worry. So if I woke up in the night, I couldn't get back to sleep because I was worried about tomorrow, you see, always worried. I got that from my dad. I think he was a bit like that. But he taught me how to be worried, my father, you see, about the future.
Right. Right.
But at the age of 40, when I drew that grid for the first time, I realized that I was spending far too much time in the worry box and not enough time in the optimistic box. And I determined to shift my gears. Now, what you can make that decision in a moment, but it takes literally months of continuous self-awareness, because, you know, if I decide not to bite my nails, it's not like I'd never bite my nails again. You have to work at it, you know.
Right.
And the same is true for thought, even more, because thought is so with us all the time. It's difficult to think about your thinking because we're in it, you know. And so once I decided what I had to do, which is shift my mind from the fear box to the optimistic box, it probably took me about a year to master, but now I've got it down to a T. And you know, that was about maybe 17 years ago. I discovered this box. I was sitting in a cafe in Cheltenham, and I was thinking about thinking, and I drew these boxes, and I had a little light bulb come over my head, and I think, yes, this is how you do it, and this is how I've been going wrong. And I could then see that some of the people I knew could be characterized by the different grids. You know, Richard is always angry, Roger is always nostalgic, and my dad were always worried, and my brothers always worried. But now I'm the black sheep of the family, because now I'm the optimistic one, you see.
Yes. No,
and it's interesting that other people, when you become optimistic, they come a little bit suspicious. They say, what have you been taking?
What are you on? What sort of medication are you on? I really love the grid. And, you know, I was, again, taking notes because I thought it was such a, you know, mental models can be very powerful.
Yes.
To explain the situation that we are experiencing in our day-to-day lives. So thank you for sharing that with everyone. I mean, that is really, really powerful. You know, kind of along those lines, I'm curious, you know, what do you think is one leadership trait or quality that most people tend to overlook?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's rationality. Rationality. It was the middle one of my first three. Remember, clarity, rationality, positivity.
Yes.
Okay, rationality, in my opinion, is the single most important and neglected characteristic of leadership. When you ask people what leadership is, they say what I did say, which is the ability to create a vision and inspire people to take action towards it. That's what everybody says, because that's what it is. But rationality now is mankind's greatest asset, our human asset. The humans have been defined as the rational animal. In ancient Greece, Aristotle defined humans as the rational animal. Now, it's our rationality that makes us more than a chimpanzee. We're very similar to chimpanzees, genetically speaking, but that little bit of extra brain called the neocortex at the front of our head here gives us what we might call the rational faculty. And it's the rational faculty that makes us everything that makes us human. It gives us our literature, it gives us mathematics, it gives us language, it gives us architecture, it gives us philosophy, it gives us science, it gives us sociology, it gives us everything. It gives us our music. Without a rational mind, we wouldn't be able to write music notation. Everything that is distinctly human comes from a single faculty of mind, which is reason. Now, reason has many attributes. There are three basic types of reason. One is deductive reason, one is inductive reason, and the other is creative reason. I go through them. Deductive reason is when you are applying old knowledge to new circumstances. Old knowledge applied to new circumstances. So, for example, medical diagnosis is a deductive science. The medic has knowledge of certain illnesses and the symptoms which are attending them. If a patient walks in with those symptoms, he says, this person has the symptoms of flu, say, for example. So therefore, they probably got flu. So it's a deductive science. And the more educated the medic is, the better they are at deducing what's wrong with you when they meet you. That's deductive science. Inductive science is the opposite. It is the creation of new knowledge from observation and experiment. That's inductive reasoning. And so, for example, in Europe, there's the CERN particle accelerator, where they're using technology to create new subatomic particles and understand the very nature of matter. So these are inductive scientists. They're trying to create knowledge rather than use knowledge, you see. And then finally, creative reason is the inventor's reason, the person who would sit down in a chair, have a light bulb moment and create something new from nothing, you see. So I always put Steve Jobs would that be a great example, or Walt Disney or Thomas Edison, who gave us the light bulb. You know, these people had the literally light bulb moment for Thomas Edison. I know, I'm going to make a light bulb. It's better than candles. And see, that didn't exist before Thomas Edison thought of it. Right. And now look at the world, completely changed from a single person's idea.
It's amazing.
So these are three types of rationality, but rationality is more than that. Rationality is also an ethics, because as I mentioned earlier, we must treat all people and all problems according to reason. If we don't treat people reasonably, you see, people expect to be treated reasonably. If you don't treat them reasonably, you're treating them unreasonably. And nobody will stand being treated unreasonably for very long before they walk out. So rationality, again, is also an ethics. So there's four things. And one more thing, rationality is also the basis of all mental health, because to the degree to which a person loses their sense of reason, to the degree they become irrational and illogical, is the degree they find themselves disconnected from reality. And when a person feels disconnected from reality, they become confused, bewildered, and they lose their confidence. How can they be confident? They don't know what the hell's going on. You see, I don't understand what's going on. What's going on?
They're totally lost.
They feel totally lost. And the more they lose their reason, the more they become irrational, the more they become disconnected from what the real world is really doing, the more they are mentally unstable. And so mental health is based upon rationality, and the more rational that we can become, the more mentally healthy we are. So if you attach rationality to positivity, rationality was point number 2. Positivity is point number 3. We've got the intellect, which is rational, and the emotions, which is positive. Well, that's the whole deal, you see. We are really two-part minds. We've got an intellect and we've got an emotional base. The emotional base is very powerful, but it must be kept on the positive side of the line. And we've got an intellect. We should run on our lives on the best intellect we've got, you see. So we run it on the neocortex at the front, not the brainstem at the back.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lizard has got a brainstem, but a lizard doesn't have a wonderful cortex like we've got. So we'll use it to our best advantage.
Oh, I thought that was such a good, again, I like how you have created a common thread through all these different thoughts, because one tangent that you didn't exactly make, but alluded to, was essentially, the more we're able to stay in the, the good future quadrant, the more positive, not only our self-image is, our interactions with others, and
yes.
also our own mental health. Right.
Yes.
And so it's just to your point, it's the combination of both the rational mind as well as the way we think about things and everything. So that is, thank you for bringing that all together. I really appreciate, I'll call it the elegance in which you have packaged all these items together, because we hear about all these almost independently, all these independent
yes.
actions, but
yes.
it's so hard to bring it all together and say, okay, so like, how do I actually implement it on my own?
Yes.
And how do I actually, start practicing these ideals in my day-to-day life, in my career, personally or professionally? So yes. I thought, please go ahead.
I was going to say, I got two pictures inside I want to give you in your mind. Knowledge is hierarchical. It has to be structured and it has to be organized into networks of thought.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine a tree like this. It's all structured, you see. So
Yes.
I've got, like, my main trunk is how can I get the best of myself and others? Then it branches into 3, clarity, reason, emotion. Then it branches into 6. And then it branches again and again. But everything is a network of knowledge, you know, it's hierarchical. I call this a tree of knowledge, you see. Now, this is how the human mind understands things. If it's just fragmented bits and pieces, we can't make anything of it. If it's
Right.
connected into a system of thought, then everything supports everything else. Everything's got a place on the tree and everything makes a lot of sense. So picture a tree as the good, and then picture a jigsaw puzzle, which is unbuilt in the box. Now imagine a box of jigsaw puzzle pieces. The information is there, but it's in bits. And somebody picks up a handful of jigsaw puzzle pieces and throws it at you, you see, and then picks up another handful and throws that at you. And by the time they finish throwing all this information at you, you've got all the pieces, but they've just been given to you in a random order. You say, and then he says, well, you've got all the information, go and do what you can with that. And you say, I don't understand it. You know, he says, well, I've told you everything, and he did, right? They told
Technically,
you
yes.
everything that was required, except not in the right order.
Right.
So the order of presentation of information is absolutely paramount as to whether the person will understand and be able to use it. So that's why I'm glad you noticed that it's very structured.
Mm-hmm.
If it's unstructured information, it's like being thrown a handful of jigsaw puzzle pieces, which your mind can do nothing with.
Yes, I totally agree. So my background is in engineering, so I really appreciate structured information for comprehension, redistribution, so forth and so on. So yes, if no one else appreciates it, you heard it from me. I really appreciate that structured and ordered approach, because to your point, when information is hierarchical, or just following fractal patterns, kind of this subsequent branching, it's really hard to figure out exactly where do I place this, and where's more fundamental and things like that. So I think that's
Yes.
that's awesome. Which brings me to my next question, which is, if you had to focus on one skill or act, everyone wants a cheat code, everyone wants to know what is the accelerated path. So if you had to focus on one skill or one action to really excel, in your personal life and career, what would it be?
Yes. This is now in addition to what I've already said. So this is not instead of. There's another thing I'd like to put on the list of things to do, which is train
Okay.
the memory. Train the memory. Everything that we do is predicated on remembering things. And this has been being brought to me starkly because over the last couple of years, because my mother is now 83 years of age and she's got dementia. Now, I've always been interested in memory. From the age of 11, I was interested in memory because I came across a book by a guy called Harry Lorraine. You may know, he's an American person. He's dead now, but he was a conjurer and he was also a memory trainer. And I bought his book, How to Develop a Perfect Memory. So I've always been interested in memory, but I'm even more interested now because my mother is losing hers and she's dementing, and it's absolutely catastrophic results of not being able to remember, lay down new memories. For example, I was with my mother in a house that she's been in for now 55 years, and she couldn't find the light switch. And
Wow.
it's that bad. And my mother now has a memory that loops round every about 8 seconds. It's gone, you see. She can remember memories from her childhood, crystal clear. She can remember what her sister did to her when they were 5, but she can't remember what I said to her 5 minutes ago. And so it's a bizarre thing. And memory is such a profound and fundamental thing. But memory is not a fixed asset. Like my height, I'm 5'9". I'm always going to be 5'9". I wish I was taller, but I'm never going to be. But memory is much more like strength. See, I can make myself stronger, but I can't make myself taller. So certain things about us are genetically mediated and they're fixed. Others are genetically mediated, but they go within quite a broad range of possible expression, you see. So certainly my strength limits are going to be fixed at some point. My job is to find out what is my potential for those things which are developable, you know, if I can say that, trainable, I say trainable. Now, memory falls into the category of trainable asset. Well, a lot of people complain that memory is no good. You know, I keep forgetting my keys. I park my car and I can't find it. You know, I walk into the kitchen, open the fridge, I can't remember why I went in there. So a lot of people are forgetful, and you know, I'm one of them. But I'm working on it, and I'm reading the books on memory training, and I'm trying to employ some of the strategies that they have been presenting over the years. And by the way, these go all the way back to ancient Greece as well, because before the printing press in 1415, everything, we had no books, because books were always handwritten before the printing press. So if you go back to ancient Greece, there was no printing press. So all books were handwritten. So books were very rare and precious things. So it was an oral society all the way up to about 1450. It was an oral society, and people had to remember stories, remember facts, remember family, remember everything was not written down. Most people were illiterate. So memory training in ancient Greece was part of schooling. But when the printing press came along, that became redundant. And rather than teach people to memorize things, we taught people to write things down. So handwriting became more important than memory training. And there's a massive advantage to being literate, but there is also advantage to training the memory, because the memory is, as I say, a trainable asset. Now, I've developed some. Yes, did you want to say something?
No, it just kind of, you know, we may not have the data around this, but to your point, when memory training was much more prevalent, I wonder what would the rates of dementia and things like that be when memory training is a part of daily life and daily society. So just a tangential.
I'll just give you a line on that. I don't think people lived long enough to find out in those days.
Also
my mother's
true.
83. Yeah. So but
true.
If you looked at the death rates, you know, prior to the Louis Pasteur and his germ theory,
right, 35, 40,
people were dying, you know, between their 30s and 50s. Most people didn't get to dementia age; they'd be dead well before that. So I don't think that information would be available.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But I've created a mnemonic, by the way. A mnemonic is a memory aid, mnemonic, and I've created a mnemonic for memory aids, right? And it's called RAISE, RAISE. So when I'm trying to teach people memory training, I give them this mnemonic for memory training, which is RAISE. R stands for repetition. A stands for association. I stands for imagination. S stands for structure, the thing we've already talked about. And E stands for effort. So let's go through them real quick. R stands for repetition, meaning repetition is the mother of learning. I'm sure you've heard that phrase. You know, if you hear it once, you'll probably forget it. If you hear it twice, you'll probably forget it. But if you hear it 5 times, you'll probably remember it. And the more repetitions beyond 5, the more and more likely you are to just retain it simply through repetition's sake. I think it was Napoleon Bonaparte who said repetition is the strongest argument. So he believed in repeating simple messages. A stands for association. Our minds remember things by association. So if you hear a piece of music, that's likely to remind you of a person or a place when you first heard it, you see. So you're at a party, you hear a piece of music. Later, a year later, you hear the same piece of music and you think, oh, I heard that at the party, you see. And so we operate by association. So a lot of memory training is based around associating what you want to know to what you already know. That's the big trick. What you want to know, or new knowledge to old knowledge. If you can make some kind of an imaginative link between what you want to know to what you already know, you're in business. Which leads us to that next letter, I, imagination. So A and I work together as pair. Imagination and association, they work as a twin pair, and they work in harmony with each other to create memories. Usually most people visualize, we think in pictures. So if you can picture what it is you're trying to remember, you're going to have a better chance of memorizing it than if you can't picture it. In fact, when somebody is trying to understand something, they say, I just don't see it, you see. Now, that's literally true. They can't see it in their imagination. And unless and until they can create a mental image of something, they won't be able to understand it and they won't be able to memorize it. So when I am training, I always try to create an image, like I gave you the jigsaw puzzle versus the tree, you see. And then people can see it in their mind's eye. And then they say, oh, yes, now I see. And they literally mean that to be true, because that's how understanding works. The S we've already talked about, that's structure. We've already mentioned the tree. And the E is simply effort, which is memorizing is hard work. It's easy to forget, it's not so easy to remember. So you have to pour a certain amount of effort, and even if you are using a mnemonic device, it's not magic, you still have to put effort into it. So when I'm training memory training, which I don't do very often because it's more of a hobby for me, but sometimes people ask me for it and I like to do it. So I do sometimes a half-day workshop on memory training, but I just think of it as something which I can use as a trainer. I have to remember what it is I'm going to say. And when I'm talking to you, I'd already prepared a few notes and I memorized what I was going to say before I got here, because I don't want to be thinking, oh, what was that thing I wanted to say, you know? Or at the end of the interview, you say, oh, I wish I'd have said that, but I forgot.
Right.
You know, so memory is a tremendous tool, and I don't think a lot of people put too much effort into it.
No, I think you're right. And, you know, now that we're having this conversation, I'm like, wow, I'm definitely I err on the side of writing things down as opposed to committing things to memory. And you've inspired me to say, you know what, I probably could. One, it is hard work, which is why I'm sure other people don't do it as well. But to your point, it definitely is powerful when you can pull on these things ad nauseum, or, you know, at will, as opposed to saying, where was that note? I wrote it down. It's so great to have an archive, but it's also really wonderful to have things kind of at the ready that you can pull down for your own self-edification or self-motivation, like we were talking about before. I feel
Can I
like
say one thing? Can I say one
please go
thing?
ahead.
There are two famous people who never wrote anything down when you thought they would have. One was Jesus, and the other was Socrates. Right? Why not? And the answer is because
Right?
well, most of the people they were talking to couldn't have read it anyway. And
Fair.
secondly, they use metaphors and stories and imagery. You know,
Yes.
Jesus's stories are all about imagery.
They are.
Socrates is all about imagery. So if you can get people to, if you tell people a story, they will remember the story, and along with the story, they remember the information. So if you want to see the power of not writing things down, look at Jesus. He left it to his disciples to write things down. They wrote it down years after the event, but Jesus gave them the material by speech.
Right.
See?
Right.
And all the great speakers do that. They don't give handouts. They just make the speech. Winston Churchill was another great speech writer. And, you know, he didn't send out handouts, but his words echo through time.
That's brilliant. And again, I had never made the connection between storytelling and memory. But you're exactly right. Jesus, an amazing storyteller, parables, you know, all those things are really ways to commit lessons that we need for daily life to memory and be able to apply them in a variety of situations. And Churchill, of course, wow, the level of rigor and thought leadership you've committed to this topic of leadership and personal discovery and enhancement. It is so evident by how you present the information so succinctly. So that doesn't happen overnight. Okay, that certainly takes a lot of time and effort. And, you know, I certainly want to highlight it because I think in a lot of these conversations, we can just kind of take the information, be like, oh, that was interesting, and go on. But we don't necessarily take the time to appreciate the level of thought partnership it takes to get to that point, right? Like, this isn't something that just happens a eureka moment after 5 minutes of thought. This is something that, you know, I have it, and I think I have this idea fully fleshed out, and I'm going to refine it little by little over time. So I definitely want to commend you for just the level of elegance in which you present this information. And I certainly recognize it, and I'm sure that our viewers recognize it as well.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, there's a great line from Isaac Newton. He says, "I'm standing on the shoulders of giants," and you've heard that phrase.
I have.
It seemed when I was a kid, it seemed obvious to me that certain things are true. It seemed to me obvious. By the time I'm about 14 or 15, I was thinking it seems obvious that it's better to be happy than sad. It's better to be healthy than sick. It's better to be wealthy than poor. So how do you do this, you see? So I started reading books quite at an early age. I mean, I was quite young to read. I got into this idea of personal development very early. I stumbled across a book, and I'm sure you've heard of it. The first book I ever read in personal development was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Dale Carnegie, yes.
Yeah. And then the second book, I'm sure, very old book, Napoleon Hill's book.
Oh, Think and Grow Rich.
Think and Grow Rich was the second book I read. See, so much for the memory training.
No, you're wonderful. You're perfect. I think it's great. And, I think a lot of times we can allow our cognitive reactions to things. And to your point, the external influences like the media and politicians that want us to be in, what is it, future bad state. They're sometimes in direct conflict with what a 14-year-old can say. It's better to be happy than sad.
Yeah.
It's better to be rich than poor. It's better to be, like all these things. And we're like, no, but who am I to want to be happy? Who am I to want to be wealthy? Who am I to want these things? When a 14-year-old can say, you know what? I think this is what I desire, and I'm just going to figure out how to get that. Right. So with that in mind, Chris, do us a favor, pull back the curtain. Okay. What do you consider to have been your secret weapon for success up until now?
Secret weapon to success. Let me say two. There's curiosity and persistence. Or let's put it in one concept: persistent curiosity.
I love it.
We call it persistent curiosity.
I love that.
As I said, the question occurred to me, like, how do you get healthy? How do you get strong? How do you have a good memory? How do you attract people to you? How do you resolve conflicts? How do you get rich? How do you do this? I remember people giving me what I called, I didn't call it then, but now I know it to be a false dichotomy. But they would say you can either be happy or rich. My mother would say, well, she would say something like, I'd rather be poor but happy rather than rich but sad. She'd be looking at Princess Diana and say, look, she's got all that money and she's still sad, you see. And I thought, yeah, but you don't have to choose, do you? Can you not be healthy, happy, doing well financially, likable, honest, long-lived? Can't you have it all if you do the right things? It just seemed to me that if I did the right things and equally I avoided the wrong things. You can't do 5 right things but have one obvious flaw. So, for example, it only takes one hole in a Titanic to sink the whole ship. Right. The rest of the Titanic was terrific, but it had a hole in it and it sank the whole ship. So you have to do 2 things. You have to figure out what will work, and you figure out what destroys people, and you have to keep away from the bad on all levels. You don't take drugs, you don't swear, you don't cheat, you don't steal. You don't do anything bad, not because you're so superhero, but because I don't want to pay the painful consequences that I must pay if I am bad.
Right.
Because I've been bad in my life and I've always paid a price for it. Every single time I thought I could break the rules, I've ended up, maybe not on the day I did it, you think, hey, I got away with it.
Right,
but
right.
If you get away with it once, you'll try it again. Try away with it twice, you'll do it again. And then you don't get away with it and you're in big trouble. So I learned, as I say, by the time I was getting into my middle years, I was really recognizing that every time you cheat, you're cheating yourself, because that will come back to haunt you in some way. But there's a phrase in there: life begins at 40. And about 30, like I said, I started this business at 37. But and it's what you said, it takes ages to iron out all what I call rookie mistakes that most people make and repeat decade after decade. If they're not watching themselves, most people justify themselves rather than analyze themselves, you see. If they make a mistake, they'll justify it. Well, I did it because she made me angry, that type of thing. They'll justify my upset on you, So, but I've always thought, no, look at what you're doing, and does that work for you and everyone else or not? Because if it ain't working, stop doing it. So swearing doesn't work, losing your temper doesn't work, taking drugs doesn't work, cheating doesn't work. And I sum this up into a single phrase, which is add value to the marketplace. Add value to the marketplace. Every day I speak and I talk, and everything I do will do one of 3 things. It will either add value, it will fail to add value, or it detract. I'll say that again: add value, fail to add value, or detract. But nobody wants to be around if you don't add any value. And certainly people won't be around if you're detracting from them.
Right.
The only way that you can make your way in this world is to add value to the marketplace. So this is why you're doing your product.
Absolutely.
this set of interviews. You want to add value to the marketplace, recognizing that
Mhm.
if you keep on adding value to other people, maybe not even from the same people you add value, if you keep giving out, somewhere along the line, the law of return means it comes back to you.
Absolutely.
Unless you add value, you're not going to get anything back.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of authors out there which I've spent a lot of time reading. I was just talking with this to Lindsay, my wife, and I was said there are possibly 4 authors which I would consider to be my angels, or the giants that I'm standing on. One is Anthony Robbins. You might know Anthony Robbins, the big American wonderful speaker. Ayn Rand, who is a philosopher. I like Ayn Rand. Her sidekick called Leonard Peikoff. Ayn Rand was a little bit Leonard Peikoff. He is Ayn Rand's legal heir. Now, Ayn Rand is terrific, but she's very divisive. She's like,
Yes.
You either like her or you hate her.
Completely. There's no middle ground.
An evil. Yeah. If you agree with Ayn Rand, you're a good person. If you disagree with her on anything, you're irrational evil. So although I agree with a lot of Ayn Rand, you've got to be cautious with Ayn Rand because she's very divisive. But one of the things I learned from her was the power of reason, you see, rationality, which is why I made that big speech earlier on. So Ayn Rand is terrific. Tony Robbins is terrific. Leonard Peikoff is terrific. And Isaac Asimov. Do you remember Isaac Asimov?
No.
Okay, well, Isaac Asimov is a science fiction writer, but he's also a very, very, very good science fact writer. He writes fact-based science books for the average non-scientist. So I've learned an awful lot of science. My history of science I got from Isaac Asimov. My history of philosophy I've got from Leonard Peikoff. Objectivist philosophy I got from Ayn Rand, and positivity I got from Tony Robbins. So they're my big 4. But of course, there's thousands of others. I read every day for about 2 hours and just try to pick up some more. And then writing as well. Writing's a nice way of learning, because when you write, you're forced to think about your words. You can't, if you talk, you can't quite think about your words, but when you're writing, you have so much more time to get your words right.
You do. So, and organize them in a way that people can comprehend.
Yeah, you can't share them properly when you're speaking because you can't think fast enough to put them into perfect form. But if you can spend another maybe 20-40 minutes on a document and send it, then they say the pen is mightier than the sword, don't they? The pen is mightier than the sword. So there's a number of documents which change the world,
Absolutely.
So like the American Constitution, these documents are pivotal documents in the history of people.
Oh, thank you so much, Chris. I've so enjoyed this interview. I enjoyed our conversation of mental models, of reframes, and I've learned a lot in this conversation. And even as someone who studies leadership and obviously is out there similar to you and helping people advance in their own leadership discovery personally and professionally, it's always good to have this thought partnership and a different perspective. And as I mentioned before, I really appreciate your candor. And the diligence in which you have really categorized this information, where I think, to your point, the order of presentation really does matter and really helps people crystallize. So, yes. Along those lines, I understand that you have a gift that you'd like to share with everyone. Please do tell us more about that before we sign off.
Yeah, well, the gift comes in 2 parts. One is we have a free 1-hour webinars which we run first Friday of every month, and all of the people on the network are invited to join. There's no price attached to this, and they come in 2 categories. The first one is a rolling program of the 3 things we start with: clarity, reason, positive emotion. Then we spend an hour on each. And then the second part of this I call these one-off limited editions. These are just one-off 1-hour things. Sometimes it's memory, for example, and then we don't come back to it. And then sometimes it's mind mapping, which is related back to the tree. Or it could be anything that people want to know about, and they'll send me suggestions and we'll do a 1 hour on it. So that goes on once a month on the first Friday, I should say. at the beginning of the month. And the second thing is we'll be attaching to this video a link to a discount code. If anybody wants to attend any of our work, then we can apply the code and we'll get a discount added on to, or should taken away from the price of the ticket. But I want to thank you for adding value to the marketplace by putting this program together. I'm very excited to have this opportunity to talk to you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. And, to your point, I think that collaboration is really the lifeblood of business interactions and really our own personal development. So, admittedly, this is a way for me to get even better at what I do, because now I get to thought partner with other people who are leaders and have been doing it many, whose careers are longer than mine have been. Mine has been so far. So I really appreciate your willingness to hop on. And certainly I'm thrilled and just blown away by this conversation. I know it was wonderful for me as well. So, everyone, as Chris mentioned, we're going to have links to his webinars as well as to the discount code. It'll be linked below this video. So please do not walk to that link, because if this interview is anything, is just a small testament to the caliber of work that he does. I know that you are absolutely in for a treat. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time today. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, just again, thank you. This obviously has taken a lot of work on your part to put this together, and it's a lot of time as well, because you're doing a lot of interviews. And so I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to your network. And if I can help you in any way, then I will in the future. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Do have a great day ahead.
Take care. Bye-bye.